Here at Michigan Family Wellness, we believe chiropractic care and nutritional-based therapies are a foundational part of a healthy family lifestyle. No matter where you're at in the mitten, having a family is such an exciting time of life. So instead of feeling overwhelmed by stress, fatigue, and responsibilities with the kids, we invite you to become part of this empowering community to create happy, healthy families. By providing engaging interviews and practical applications, Dr. Wallner cultivates family health by equipping our listeners with the tools they need to elevate wellness in their own family. Dr. Wallner passionately serves the Michigan community at his chiropractic and nutrition-based practice, where he specializes in pregnancy, pediatrics, and family wellness care. And now, here's your host, Dr. Kyle Wallner.
Good day, families, and welcome home. That's right, my name is Dr. Kyle, and this is the Empowering MFW family, and we are so glad to be with you today. If you are joining us for the first time, I want to thank you for tuning in. The health of you and your family is your number one priority. It is your greatest asset. The best way to have a healthy family is by living a family wellness lifestyle. So, if you're looking for efficient, effective, and sustainable ways to elevate your health and the health of your family, then I strongly recommend you make yourself comfortable because we have an amazing show for you today. And before we get to today's episode, let me say a few words as I do every week about Power Performance Gym. Power Performance Gym is dedicated to helping you achieve your best definition of healthy and strong. Power Performance specializes in strength and conditioning for individuals, small groups, and athletic teams, weight and pain management, as well as recovery and nutrition. Everyone at Power experiences a full movement and health analysis to build your blueprint for success, targeting your goals. Mention the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast to receive your movement and health analysis as a complimentary gift. Learn more about how Power Performance can help you move, look, and feel better by visiting powergym.com. That's POWRGYM.com. Dr. Katherine digs deep into the root of your health issues. She provides a space for her patients to discover and to be authentically themselves. Dr. Katherine provides the emotional and spiritual support for people in major life transitions by providing emotional safety and a place to grow for every patient. All right, families, let's jump into today's interview. And just by way of introduction, I want to welcome the families and everyone listening today, whether they're joining us on the live feed with Facebook or whether they're joining us on the replay or whether they're actually listening on the podcast. I want to welcome everyone. I'm honored to be joined today by Dr. Katherine. Welcome to the podcast, Doc. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. This should be a lot of fun.
Well, Doc, I am excited to jump into our discussion on how you help women, mothers, and families elevate their health and family wellness lifestyle, especially as it relates to fertility, preconception, and regulating their hormones. But before we get there, we have two questions that we always ask every guest. So help our listeners and myself get to know you more by telling us just a little bit of what family looks like for you.
Okay. Wow. Well, my family is all around the world. I live over in Hong Kong, and my mom and my dad and my brothers are in Toronto, but I've also got family in Vancouver and BC, and friends and family, really close family as well, living over in the UK right now. My own little family here in Hong Kong is my hubby. We've been together 30 years.
Nice. Congratulations.
And yes, I am as young as I look. We've been together a long time, just like you and your sweetie. And I've got two teenagers and a dog.
Awesome.
Yes, a little puppy. So
again, I just love for people to connect like on that emotional level. We are real people having real conversations. So, and just one more thing here, Doc, by way of introduction, another thing we love to say on the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast is that we are smitten with the mitten. So have you ever experienced the Great Lakes, or have you ever experienced, anything that the Michigan has to offer?
Yes, I have. I've even been to Grand Rapids, Michigan.
All right.
I did a road trip there from Hamilton, Ontario, and I'm from Lake Ontario. So yes, I know the lakes, and been up to Lake Huron as well, and Erie, and yeah, I'm familiar with the Hood. It's my old stomping ground. So yeah, love it.
Fantastic.
Love the weather.
Awesome. I just love the international component with, you being out in Hong Kong right now, and just, the world travels that you have, and actually bringing everything back to Michigan. So that's fantastic. All right, families, we're going to go ahead and get more in depth, because I really want everyone listening and watching today to benefit from your expertise, your experiences, and your unique perspective. And what I find makes these conversations so relevant and so powerful is just by sharing our stories. So, Dr. Katherine, would you mind just sharing your story and kind of what motivated you to become a natural fertility doctor?
Well, I have a long history of healers in my family. I was just posting a little picture in my Facebook story this morning, and I had, fresh spinach, lightly steamed, for breakfast with some nice pumpkin seeds and a little bit of rice flour. Noodles, and I was thinking of how proud I would have made my grandmother Jess. She was a whole foods, no sugar, no salt kind of lady. She was very conscientious of eating good, healthy food, and I think that's just filtered into my entire life, and wanting to be natural and wanting to use non-pharmaceuticals in order to regulate my body and feel healthy, stems from that far back. And the whole idea for me of being able to monitor my fertility cycle without having to use any hormones that would be unnatural is extremely motivating. So it starts with grandma, and then it just kept moving forward as I learned more and more about my body and the needs of my body, that I just wanted to understand what was going on. And it's pretty complex and pretty exciting, all the messages that our bodies give us.
Yeah.
And we know that, as practitioners, and I'm sure all your guests know that from you as well. Like, listen closely and you'll be able to figure out what's going on, what's out of balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just reading actually off of your website, Doc, when you were actually in naturopathic college, and you were trying to follow your ovulation cycle more closely. Can you tell us just a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it was. My journey started earlier than that in trying to understand where the cycle went, how our cycles were telling us messages. But yeah, it was quite, it was really sad for me what I experienced in my second to last year. I actually miscarriage. And this is a very common experience, but that doesn't make it any less painful. And the overwhelming desire that my body just kind of developed, it just took over, that all of a sudden I just had this real need and this real drive to understand, why had my body lost this child? Was there something I had done? I wasn't actually ready. I hadn't been preparing my body. I was under a lot of stress. I was in my final years of medical school. But it just became so important to me. And it gave me as well an empathy for other women who might have that repeatedly happen. It was, overwhelmingly sad. And also just, you're thinking, is this going to be inevitable? Is this what's happening with my body? This is something that has been important to me. Right. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So started to be more careful with it and started to teach it a lot more to my patients as a student, and also my colleagues, and then later on to students when I was teaching at Bridgeport, and just, trying to let women know early on they need to take care of their fertile body from an early age.
Absolutely. Well, Doc, I just want to start off by saying, thank you so much for being vulnerable. Thank you so much for sharing your story there, especially with the miscarriage. I know that's sometimes difficult to do. And, but I just really appreciate that, connection that you can bring to your patients, and then how that motivates you in this passion that you have for helping women, with their preconception, with their fertility, you talk about how you used specific herbs and vitamins to improve your fertility. And that's just something that we're all about here on the family wellness community and context.
Yeah.
So. And then did that kind of frame your practice now over in Hong Kong? It's just this focusing on natural fertility. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. I mean, right out of school, I did end up pregnant again, and had my first baby in my final year of medical school, which was crazy, but right away was just super motivated to teach other women what I had learned. And so when I taught at Bridgeport, that was a big part of what I was telling women about and telling the students about, and they were really excited about it, that this was something that they'd never been taught in such detail. So then it just continued. I mean, my focus has always been on helping women balance and understanding the hormonal cycle of our bodies really helps us understand where the imbalances are. So now my focus is on, preconception is my joy, is where I really feel that is an amazing place for us and you yourself as well as healthcare practitioners to be preventative, right? But we don't always get there in time, and that's always our message.
Yeah.
So I'll help women. That's my real joy. But then I'm helping women who are having some issues trying to get pregnant. Maybe it's taking them a bit longer, or it's a second child and they're not as sure. And then, of course, post, after once they've had the baby, often again, our hormones will go a little bit wacky, and women won't understand why they're feeling sad and they've got this new baby and they should be overjoyed, So that's a big part of my practice too. It's just this whole connecting to your body, understanding that importance of that balance between the hormones, and then using herbs and food and lifestyle changes to make sure that you come back to balance. Yeah.
And that's a great point, because something that I look at a lot in terms of research, or something that I see a lot in clinically, is in terms of kids that are born who are actually obese. How do you tell an obese baby to eat less and exercise more, like you would with an adult that has, metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes or something?
Yeah.
You can't, because that's all babies do, really. So a lot of the research now suggests that women are going to actually save the world. So the current theory, one of the current theories, and forgive me if I'm going way off topic here, but so our insulin levels, or the levels of insulin, how our bodies, regulate blood sugar and our metabolism, a lot of that comes from your mother, or the blueprint for that comes from the mother. So if the mother happens to be obese, or happens to be not living the most healthiest lifestyle, then that can significantly influence how the baby's metabolism will be. So the whole point is, if you can just educate women of childbearing age, how to take care of themselves and how to best provide that preconceived framework for health for their baby, then you can really start to reverse these skyrocketing trends of metabolic syndrome, high cholesterol, high lipids, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all those sorts of things. So that being said, I do want to jump into maybe a little bit of a discussion on hormones. And I know I'm going to ask you later about your fertility chart or your hormone chart that you have. But yeah, in actually terms of hormones, let's say there's a woman listening, today or watching with us that, has no idea of how all this works. How would you just kind of start someone from square one in terms of monitoring or charting or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I sent over to you this handy little chart that I use, and I'm always, modifying a little bit the extra things that I feel it's important for women to chart. But the basics are just, looking at your body temperature. So you make sure you take it at, we call it the basal body temperature. And then the second thing is looking at mucus, so discharge, and taking it close and starting to understand what's going on there. So what a woman can do is she can just start by hand. I love that it's by hand. So many of these apps that are being used these days are not as accurate. They give you some strange results around when you're, when you're fertile and when you're going to be starting your cycle. So doing it by hand is just like a whole part of really involving your body, like you were talking about women that are getting pregnant and not taking care of the food that they're putting in their body. This is like you're physically involved. You're getting your body involved in watching the signs that your body's giving you. So you're going to find that you take your temperature every morning at the same time. Don't get out of bed. Make sure, that you've gotten 4 hours of sleep. There's a whole process to it. And you're going to see that there's like this regular pattern, and it'll be unique to you, and then there's a slight increase, and that's all related to the different timing of your cycle, right?
Yeah.
So as you start to chart all of this stuff, then you can see where the imbalances are. Then you can see, am I not having any signs of ovulation? Is there maybe too much estrogen? Is there not enough progesterone? There's all sorts of signs that our bodies will give us. So just simple charting by hand with a pencil on the paper and observing all of that is the first step. And it's really, it's incredible. Some of the people who come to see me, they've already had 2 children, and they're still not completely aware of how this all works.
Yeah.
And, like if it's not bothering us, we just kind of don't pay attention to it. But it's an amazing part of our, like you said, super women that are going to save the world. This is all a part of it, understanding all this super stuff that's going on with our bodies and not suppressing it and not ignoring it,
Yeah.
We need to be aware of your studies. Yeah.
Perfect. So just to really break it down for people joining us on the video and people listening on the audio, you're saying that during the cycle, depending on which hormone is the highest or which hormone changes are occurring, we'll actually see physical changes, whether it's temperature or discharge, or whatever we're measuring. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. So then by charting that or by tracking that, then you can see trends and patterns, and then you can make adjustments specifically for you, going back to your point about bio-individuality. Does that sound right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's some charting methods that go into such detail that, you can diagnose different ailments, different more than just the hormonal issues. You can figure out other things that might be more serious going on with your body just by observing your chart. So this is a super easy way and an excellent start to starting to understand your body.
Yep. And that's a great point too. I can't agree more. It's a great start. I'm sure you do some of this as well with your practice or your patients. There's so much more in depth you can go in terms of blood testing, in terms of specific hormone testing, but just charting, simple things like temperature, how you feel. In fact, that's a great question. What would you say, Doc, would be the top signs of ovulation? If someone's really trying to hone in on their ovulation time frame, if you will.
I could talk all day about this, and I'm working on presenting a course too, a DIY course for women to find out all this stuff and to understand all the different types of mucus. And to me, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Other people think it's a bit odd that I talk about magical mucus, but really that's like a big important part of knowing whether you're fertile is having this mucus that is fertile mucus. And the most fertile mucus, and here we're, what do you say, spoiler alert or not?
Spoiler alert, right.
You're just like, warning, this gets graphic.
Right.
But, the mucus that you're looking for is long, stringy mucus, like Spider Woman mucus. And that's the most fertile. And what it's doing is it's actually, early on, the mucus is nourishing the sperm. It filters it out And then there's a different type of mucus that comes along and allows the sperm to hang out and wait around for the ovulation to occur. When ovulation occurs, that mucus sends a little message and gets it to transfer itself and transport itself to the right location. So if you don't have that mucus, then the sperm will not survive. The environment is very acidic, and it's not, it's a hostile environment when the body is infertile. So if you don't have that fertile mucus, then the sperm will not survive, and then you can't end up with, if you're trying to get pregnant, you won't end up pregnant. And that also can, if you're just monitoring and trying to understand what's going on with your body, then it may be that you're not ovulating, But what's interesting is I have been doing a lot of studies, and there are several, markers like luteinizing hormone and estrogen peaks and all these different blood tests that we can do. But we're never 100% sure that we've actually ovulated. So all these hormones could be messaging, and still the message is not 100% getting to the ovary to release the egg. So it's a whole combination of understanding your mood changes, your temperature changes, and the mucus changes, and then understanding whether that's part of your concern or not.
Absolutely. And just going back to your point about messengers, just being a chiropractor, this is one of the reasons why I am so passionate about, helping individuals and families, yes, but specifically women, specifically with fertility, just because there's such a great connection in terms of the central nervous system, to the uterus, to the ovaries. And, yes, hormones are signalers as well. But gosh, just in terms of the decrease in stress that you can derive from that artful chiropractic adjustment, just from the communication between, because when you really study all of this complexity with the hormone signaling, everything is coming from the hypothalamus, the pituitary, so to really get those brain changes as well on a higher level with the artful chiropractic adjustment is just, what gets me out of bed every morning. I want to read one quick thing here, Doc. This is actually from the American Pregnancy Association. I've actually referenced it several times on the podcast, but just to avail anyone new who might be joining us today. Real quick. So in many cases, fertility issues may be associated with improper nervous system function, poor nutrition, high stress, and poor lifestyle habits. Essentially exactly what we've been talking about here today, Doc. So chiropractors go ahead.
I want to say too that one thing I didn't mention that had happened, I'd been with my partner for quite a long time and had not fallen pregnant. And because I was in naturopathic college, I was a bit of a guinea pig to whatever anyone was studying. And one of the adjustments that I had was one that I've learned was more recently. One of my colleagues here in Hong Kong, she's a chiropractor and treats women when they are pregnant. But she also uses this internal move, which was done for me by a Bowen therapist. But just the bottom, the coccyx was out of place. And I fell pregnant shortly after that and I don't know if I had been, because I used to toboggan a lot as a girl, and did lots of activities where I would have easily fallen and bruised. So that whole connection of the spine to reproduction and relaxation. It's huge. It's huge.
Absolutely.
So,
the lumbar nerve plexus, the sacral nerve plexus, all of that goes right with the coccyx there. And I'm familiar with that technique. I've heard many people say the exact same things. But just to continue, and thank you for sharing that, Doc, I really appreciate it. But just to finish out that thought, chiropractors are nervous system specialists, and reducing interference in the nervous system, is what I do every day at the office. And so I also want people to be aware that chiropractic care can be used in conjunction with other accepted approaches to resolving fertility, the ones like we're talking about here today, the charting, the testing, the hormone, the blood testing, and can greatly improve the chances of successful even medical procedures such as, IVF and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go any further, I do want to mention one other thing, in terms of, fertility is a team effort, if you will, if that makes sense, right? So let's not discount, let's not discount the other side of the equation and put let's not put all of the stress on the women, because that can be a lot to handle on their own. It is quite the miraculous event when conception does happen. A lot of men, can struggle with motility, morphology, quality of their sperm, and that sort of thing. There is a lot of that, but our focus for today is definitely on helping women with their fertility, with their preconception. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Doc, is you do a lot in terms of helping women balance their hormones as it relates to cycles of the day, especially when it comes to light, like night and day. Could you talk a little bit about that in terms of when someone stays up into the wee hours of the morning and how that affects their cortisol and melatonin, and then how that flows downstream into their estrogen, progesterone, and all that?
Yeah, I've had several stories of women who, were trying to conceive. One of my patients, she was flying off to London regularly, and she was we were in New York at the time, and she would just be constantly changing her time zone. Night was, the night was changing all the time, and she was losing lots of sleep. She was going, straight from the airplane into the hotel and not being exposed to any natural light at all. It was all fake light that she was being exposed to. So what ends up happening is the melatonin in our bodies is intricately related to the estrogen. So if we have we end up taking a melatonin, supplement or something to help us sleep, it will actually interfere with the estrogen levels.
Gotcha.
That actually will end up suppressing estrogen levels. So it's it's complicated, because you're thinking, okay, well then it would be okay if I stayed up all night because I'm reducing my melatonin, but you're actually just influencing what's normally going to be the message to our pineal gland. And you were talking about that hypothalamus, and we actually have we are sensitive to light, the exposure to light. So if we're in front of our computer screens, to the last minute of the day, or we're sleeping, in bright rooms that have all sorts of electronics, what's that?
Or even their phones.
Your phone. Yeah, we're constantly exposed. I even find myself, just before bed trying to read my Kindle, but it's bright light being, exposed to my eyes and my pineal gland, and it's affecting my sleep, and it's going to affect the normal fluctuation of estrogen and luteinizing hormone. I mean, that's what's released. We can look at studies of all sorts of other animals, birds, and mammals as well. And we know springtime, right? The days get longer, there's more light, and that's when we start to reproduce. And it's the same with humans. We need the dark, and we need the reminder of the LH surge. We need the darkness and then an exposure to light, which would have traditionally have been the full moon. But now we've got all sorts of light disturbances that are interfering with that normal flow.
Especially with a lot of younger women that I'll see in the clinic and in the office, I'll ask them if they're sleeping well, and they'll tell me that they sleep terrible. And then I'll be like, okay, well, are you watching Netflix, till 2 o'clock in the morning, or are you, on your iPhone, until the wee hours of the night and things like that? And they'll say, every night. And I'm like, okay, what can we do in terms of, trying to decrease that screen time? Because like you said, that bright light, that blue light especially, is really stimulatory to the ocular nerves and to the brain. And that just, puts all of those hormones, the melatonin from the pineal gland, spikes cortisol at the wrong times. And it's just very difficult. Now, I will say, at least on the iPhones, I'm not sure about the Android, there are now settings on some of the newer ones that turn the light more of like a yellow light, which is not as blue. This research, like this practical application, is actually reaching these manufacturers, and they're making these changes to their products. So I take that as a great encouragement. Even just, you mentioned your Kindle. So my wife has a Kindle as well. And she specifically wanted, it's like the Kindle, she calls it the Etch-a-Sketch technology. Because it's more of a magnetic screen, I guess, versus the a lot of the bright lights, And so I guess that helps with glare. I guess that helps with, the bright lights when you're reading at night as well. But I just appreciate that, because sometimes the older technologies are actually healthier if you think about it.
Yeah. So, the old technology of reading a book.
There you go. That too.
Yeah. That one works. That's my daughter's excuse. She's got that filter on that goes on automatically at a certain time.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, Doc, as we start to wrap up our conversation for today, can you tell us more about the resource that you mentioned earlier, the fertility chart, and just kind of go back to that, circle back there, and how this can really help women elevating their fertility and their preconception?
Well, it's just this very pretty, simple chart that I've put together, and it asks you to monitor by hand your temperature every morning, look at your mucus, and then it gets into more detail, about other things that are going on, because women will notice that there's certain times of the month where they're more observant. Let's say they're more sensitive to what's going on around them. So those sorts of changes are an amazing sign as well, telling you that something's either in balance or out of balance. And, there are ways to bring all that balance back. Like you were talking about, even with our weight and, managing insulin spikes and blood glucose, that actually is a big issue for women who are trying to achieve pregnancy as well.
Absolutely.
They find that it improves results in IVF and IUI, as well as just good old natural, old-fashioned style of getting pregnant too. That monitoring that as well, and making sure you're eating the right foods. You're getting a lot of healthy oils, and you're eating really clean foods as well. And there are herbs that women can use as well, like herbal remedies that will help balance out the hormones. So they can use food, and they can use herbs, and of course there's supplements as well that are amazing for just bringing back into balance, whether it's excess estrogen or low progesterone. We can really work with them on all these levels, and they start to chart that, and I get a really good picture of what's going on with them, and they get a really great connection to their body. They're looking at, like, hey, this is not a problem that's something that's irresolvable or something that's part of my personality. This is just because, I'm not filtering, I'm not releasing, my liver's not functioning, or my nervous system needs a little tweak,
Exactly.
And they just make that little change, and life is so much better. And, and if you're going to become a mom, being balanced and being, calm and being aware of your feelings and being mindful is just like so key. You got to be super chill Zen mom and dad as well, to be able to just enjoy it, enjoy the crazy magic of every day of raising children.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that kind of like emotional psychosomatic component. That's huge. As a chiropractor, as someone that specializes in like the neuromusculoskeletal, I try to stay within that scope, but I definitely have to acknowledge you can be fixing everything, all of the physiology, all of the testing can be completely right. But I would definitely say if there's any kind of emotional block there at all, that things can be frustrating at best. That being said, I also wanted to just point out, since you are in Hong Kong, what does that relationship look like, kind of on a practical model?
I see some of my patients on Skype. In fact, often even the patients that I'm seeing live in clinic, we still do some of our catch-ups via Skype. It's really common here in Hong Kong, actually, to see even people who are in the same city. I guess it's much easier for the busy lifestyle, which
Gotcha.
I try to pull them out of, but
Right.
It's causing a lot of problems as well. But yeah, managing to see people via Zoom or Skype and, have a conversation that way and get to know each other that way.
Yeah.
And often, depending on where people are, I have contacts in different parts of the world, that can help me supply the herbs that I need.
Gotcha.
Or they can use another resource to pick up their supplements. Foods are the easiest way to heal. Most of the foods that we can get here, you can get there and all that sort of stuff. So when I do a gentle cleanse, which I like to start with all my clients, all my patients, those foods are, really basics. Things like beets were hard to get in Hong Kong for a while. But
I was going to ask you, just, off the top of my head, and feel free to answer this however you can, but from your perspective, you really do have this great international perspective, which I appreciate. Do you notice any cultural differences between different people groups, around the world, whether that may relate to, environmental or the availability of certain foods? There's more PCS over here, or there's less endometriosis over here, or more metabolic syndrome over here, things like that.
Well, I mean, I'm quite terrified of Hong Kong. I had both my babies, natural born into water at home births, with midwife and dad,
Awesome.
and then a doula the second time. But, it's illegal to have a home birth in Hong Kong.
Really?
It's highly medicalized. The cesarean rate is up around 50%. Depending on the hospital you're in, it's up to 80% in some of the hospitals.
Gotcha.
It's very medicalized. So whether it's actually something that's a result of the lifestyle or the food we're eating, I'm not sure, but definitely the influence of conventional medical practice is very strong. I'll have young women, 35 years old, who are already, starting IVF, and they've been trying for 6 months. But I mean, we definitely have a lot of PCOS. There's a lot of thyroid issues. In the Asian population, they actually have monitored, they've modified the levels of thyroid because the levels tend to be across the board very different for women of different cultural backgrounds. So that's important to be aware of. But yeah, I think there's similar issues everywhere. It's just what they have access to, and what they're aware of and what they're ready to change. In somewhere like New York City, where I practiced, and people were into raw food and they were, doing yoga. I mean, Hong Kong, since I've been here, I don't know if I can accredit myself, but since I've arrived here, there are so many more yoga studios. There's so many yogis around. There's lots of more and more raw food, but lots of vegetarian food, lots of vegan food, and people talking about meatless Mondays and lots of the restaurants. So people are becoming more conscientious of eating healthy, and there's a huge health kick here. People are very into exercising and moving their bodies and retreating. It's huge, which I love. Taking a pause within your day, within even urban retreats, which one of my good friends here does yoga retreats within the city, which is, just great and really needed here, because Hong Kong is the fastest place that I've ever lived. Yeah. Even our escalators are faster. Life moves quickly here. There's very little time for chit chat. So I would say, anxiety and wanting to get things done and high pressure, A-type personality is definitely what Hong Kong is about. Wow. New York is like a lazy village compared to the craziness of this city. Yeah. So that's our illness, definitely the Hong Kong illness.
Wow.
Yeah. So I see that a lot.
Well, again, Doc, I really appreciate the perspective. I'm sure we could be on here, all day talking about different things here and there. I want to encourage everyone to actually check out the comment section below. We'll be linking to the fertility chart that we've talked about today. And I want to encourage everyone, if they haven't already, subscribe to the Michigan Family Wellness Podcast, either on their iPhone or their Android device. And we'll also have a complete show notes page over at michiganfamilywellness.com. And thank you again, Dr. Katherine, for bringing tremendous value today and becoming part of the MFW family.
Great. Yay, more family. Love it.
Thanks again, Doc.
You,
We'll
Dr.
talk to you
Kyle.
soon. Yep.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, families, what'd you think? We'd love to get your feedback. If you would like to email me about anything you've heard on this or any previous edition of the Family Wellness Lifestyle Podcast, you may do so by writing Dr. Kyle at michiganfamilywellness.com and take full advantage of the Family Lifestyle audio library at michiganfamilywellness.com. Connect with us on social media at Michigan Family Wellness. Thanks so much for tuning in, families. Have an awesome week, and remember, we can do far more together than we could ever do apart.
Now that you've been equipped with the latest in family wellness solutions, we want to encourage you to apply these strategies right away. But the thing is, there's still so much to learn. Connect with Dr. Wallner's Chiropractic and Nutrition Office by going to MichiganFamilyWellness.com and click the newsletter sign-up button to join the informative and supportive community of chiropractic wellness. You will also receive as a gift from Dr. Wallner a copy of Michigan Family Wellness Solutions, an invaluable resource containing dynamic tools to elevate family health and vitality. Michigan Family Wellness wants to thank you for being part of today's podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and give us a 5-star rating and review.